All right, minerals and mining. We've done it before, but it's always good to come back to this because it's an ongoing endeavor in Saudi Arabia. And one of the really interesting things about covering present day Saudi Arabia is that the time between when a national priority is identified and when steps are taken to address that priority is often, shockingly short. I mean, in the U.S., by comparison, you know, has an extensive and really slow-moving legal, legislative, and bureaucratic environment that significantly extends the time needed to first agree on a policy and then actually implement that policy. Not the case today in Saudi Arabia. Things move really fast. And this is the case in the mineral sector, and specifically with regard to, quote, critical minerals, unquote. So this is one of the nice things about the 966 solution. We get to educate ourselves. So what is a critical mineral? Last year, the U.S. Geological Survey released a list of 50 minerals deemed critical to the U.S. economy and national security. You can project this to be sort of the same for most countries. A critical mineral is defined as a non-fuel mineral or mineral material essential to economic or national security and has a supply chain vulnerable to disruption. Critical minerals are also characterized as serving an essential function in the manufacturing of a product, the absence of which would have significant consequences for the economy or national security. So you see how all these things apply to Saudi Arabia as well. These critical minerals, of course, include the 17 rare earth minerals that are an essential part of many high-tech devices today and the energy transition. Do you know why they call them rare earth minerals, Lucian?
I don't know why they call them that. Are they because they're rare?
Well, you'd think so, but actually they're plentiful. But by nature, they don't, because of their chemical properties, they're typically dispersed. So although there's an abundance of them, they're really hard to mine and capture. So hence, I don't know why it's rare earth. Maybe it should be, hard to find. I don't know, hard to catch. But anyway, rare earth minerals are not necessarily short in availability, just hard to get. So there's these 50, you have these 50 minerals, and a lot of them are familiar, cobalt, lithium, nickel, palladium, in terms of the energy transition sort of things. A little known fact, I think we've mentioned on this show before, but maybe, it's something that's commonly known. Saudi Arabia is the fourth largest net importer of critical minerals. So everything I just said about the U.S., how they define critical minerals and why it matters, Saudi Arabia is in the same boat. It's the fourth largest net importer of critical minerals. Yet it's intending to manufacture more than 300,000 electric vehicles annually by 2030, and it needs minerals to support its massive green energy hub at NEOM, for example, along with any number of other projects. So, with regard to critical minerals, Saudi Arabia has a problem. And as I mentioned at the top, in typical fashion, it's sort of aggressively addressing the problem. And that's the genesis of the one big thing. Two recent developments that I wanted to note. First, in May, Ma'aden, and actually Ma'aden is the Saudi Arabian mining company, which was formed in 1997. It's 50% owned by the Public Investment Fund. It's the largest mining company in the Middle East, one of the fastest growing mining companies in the world. In 2022, Ma'aden had revenues of 10.7 billion. So Ma'aden's the real deal. We've talked about this. But in May, Ma'aden signed a 50-50 joint venture with U.S. corporate Ivanhoe Electric to explore gold, copper, silver, and electric metals in the country. Part of the deal includes Ma'aden buying an almost 10% stake in Ivanhoe. And I point that out because, like elsewhere, Saudi Arabia tends to, their habit is not just to buy a service, but invest in a technology that furthers a key sector like this. So they're buying into Ivanhoe Electric's technology to find and identify minerals. Second, in January this year, this is what I mean about moving quickly. So just in January 2023, the PIF and Ma'aden created the Manara Minerals Investment Company, Manara, to invest in mining assets globally, and particularly in metals that are critical for energy transition, these critical minerals. So just last month, roughly 7 months after it was founded, they announced a $2.6 billion deal to acquire 10% in Brazil's base metals producer, Vale. Vale's the name of the company. Vale produces nickel and copper and plans to invest 25 to 30 billion in new projects across Brazil, Canada, and Indonesia over the next decade. So you can see Saudi Arabia has been moving out on several fronts, both the geological survey at home, investing abroad to get them access to these critical minerals. Um, but one other thing, sort of on the way out, the close of this. I mentioned Saudi Arabia likes to not just be a customer, but an investor and have access to technology. They also tend to think in regard to their larger initiatives, sort of they think regionally. And you see this in their diplomacy. We've talked about that. You're seeing examples like the newly established carbon credit market intended to be a regional market. You see it even in things like football. We talked a couple episodes ago about their tie-up with African football governing body, trying to make it a regional exercise. They're looking at minerals the same way. And according to Vice Minister for Mining Affairs, Khalid al-Mudhaifer, Saudi Arabia is planning to commit more than $1 trillion to drive its green energy and industrial development projects. But in terms of investment, it won't just be on the Saudi part of your favorite word, Lucian, the Arabian Shield, but also a mineral-rich region that includes 79 countries and stretches from Africa to Western and Central Asia. And this is notable because this area holds 40 to 50% of the world's mineral resources, yet receives only 13% of global mining exploration spending. Saudi Arabia wants to be in the vanguard of developing these resources as well as the ones at home. So anyway, that's the latest on minerals and mining. I'm sure we missed some key things in there. But as I said at the beginning, it's just fascinating to watch this country and its leadership go from 0 to 60 on key sectors in just a blink of an eye. They're really moving quickly on these things.
Actually, my favorite word is not Arabian Shield; it's Hanagia, which
Yes.
in this space,
which is in the it's mining deposits in the Arabian Shield.
it is.
So it's a double plus.
It's a double plus. Hanagia and the Arabian Shield, really cool, very good one. I was thinking as you were saying that too. One of the I think maybe the third prong of it, and you got to it at the end, is foreign direct investment into the Arabian Shield and some of these unexplored areas. Like that's another focus, and that was what Hanagia, with that the auction that was had, and I guess Al Jan Brothers Mining Company won that along with it was a UK Saudi consortium, Moxico Resources and Al Jan. But that's the other part. That's the last piece of this, and you got to it at the end there. I was like, oh, but what about the foreign direct investment? Because they have abundant resources, and so what I think is so interesting is that they're not just saying, all right, well, we've got all this stuff in Saudi. It's kind of a big country geographically. There's a lot here. Let's focus here. Just like you said, and I think that's such a good point, and I think it actually applies to a lot of different things too. They're investing in the underlying technology, in the companies that are doing it here and there, so that there's knowledge sharing and best practice sharing between these companies. There's partnerships formed that make it easy for new companies to be formed to explore in these areas and to set up new sort of interests all around the world. So their interest in mining is not just mining minerals at home. It's actually a very complex strategy that's being put into place, as you noted, Richard, I think very well, quite rapidly in the last 18 months, maybe max. So it's just incredible. And this is a good one big thing, because this is one of those sectors that really follows on to the don't just say that you're going to do it, actually do it and follow through with everything you're going to plan on doing. And it's another sector as well that touches a lot of different things, EV, batteries, which is massive all around the world now, technologies. So very good one, Richard. I don't have a ton to add to it, because it's just like the story itself is like that they are moving fast and not breaking things, but they're full steam ahead with this. So it's really cool.
I think that's a very good point, and it speaks to how they've gone about it. They tend to be pretty methodical, because that foreign and direct investment has been pumped up and made more attractive because they've significantly rewritten the regulatory regulations for investment, and they're offering significant incentives, tax holidays, loans, and they've just did this earlier this year. They had their second now annual sort of mining investment forum. And so you see the marquee investments like 2.6 billion in Vale, or the marquee JVs with Ivanhoe Electric, or the Australian and other firms coming in and saying we're going to mine this, like at Hunagee or elsewhere. Prior to that, they were thinking it through. These people aren't going to come unless we change our regulatory environment, and so they've done that. So it's more attractive. So they're just not crashing about, heading off some direction willy nilly. They have a plan, and they're pursuing it. And again, notable, as we talked about, for the pace with which they're going after it.
Yeah,
That's a good point on FDI.
Yeah, that's well. I was just going to say that's a really good point as well about. I mean, like, so what's interesting is it's the Ministry of Mining and Industry, right? It's the Minister of Minerals and I got to get this right. Sorry, it's Mineral Resources. Anyway, so it's industry and mineral resources are two very kind of intertwined, but they're separate things, but
Right.
they have one minister for that, and so the minister is sort of got this juggling two balls of very different but like very fast growing challenges for Saudi Arabia. How quickly can they build 36,000 factories, which is the stated goal by 2030? And also we need to really turbocharge the mining and mineral sector in the kingdom. So he's a busy dude. You know how we have the list of busiest guys in Saudi Arabia, and we kind of just as a joke, we sort of talk about it's got to be the crown prince at the top. But you have some other guys in there that have like 4 different jobs, and it's hard to imagine how they get to sleep. The minister is one of those guys. So, yeah,
It's all interesting too, because for the longest time, I mean, going way back decades, there's petroleum, there's crude oil, there's petroleum, there's energy, there's petrochemicals. The third leg will be mining and minerals. It's interesting how the mining and minerals is now critical to future legs like EV, um, and and I just blanked on the other one. But it's sort of foundational to if they want to build an EV market, and what's essentially is going to be their automotive ecosystem. And it's also essential. Sorry, the other one was things like their nuclear. They really want to build a civil nuclear capability, and they want to be able to mine and process their own uranium, which is which they have found deposits of in Saudi Arabia. So you see how if they can get the mining and minerals right, it unleashes at least two. I'm sure there's a billion that I'm not even aware of or thinking of. I'm not smart enough to know about. Two really important future directed sectors, EVs and nuclear power.
mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden that third leg that they've been trying to get along now is becoming increasingly important.
And you have, like, going back to the concept of the strategy, you had all the top ministers from the Ministry of Industry and Mineral Resources, I finally get it right. They visited Australia, I think it was either last year or early this year, just as a team, because there's so many synergies between those two countries and how they do it. And there's so much to learn from Australia. And so they all went there, and it was part of some forum, but it was quite the showing for Saudi Arabia at this forum. So it's one of those things where we are watching it, and 100 episodes in, year and a half plus that we've been doing this, and you just sort of notice it over time really maturing very quickly for Saudi Arabia, a country that traditionally doesn't change very quickly. I know it changed quickly now seems commonplace, but pre 2016, 2017, a theme from last episode, is actually not that commonplace. And so it's amazing, really. And this is, we should get somebody from the ministry on the show at some point in the near future and give a really good update, or even Ma'aden, because it's sort of a space that's clearly important to the kingdom. So,
oh yeah, and just so we can prep you guys, the third Future Minerals Forum will be held in Riyadh, January 10, 11, 2024. So make your plans now. Look ahead.
Good time to be in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, remember that segment I did on a number of conferences in Saudi in February? I think it was February this year. And I think, what was it? Was it, something like 7 or 8 million? And it wasn't that many. Point being is, everybody wants to be in Saudi, somewhere between January and February, or late in the winter and early in the year, because the weather's so pleasant. So you can see that there's a lot of things going on in terms of conventions and forums and exhibits in Saudi Arabia during the winter months.
Yeah, it may be a proximity bias, but a lot of people I know in Saudi Arabia are not in Saudi Arabia right now, and it's not a coincidence. It is enormously hot there, and that's okay because the winter is amazing in Riyadh. It's lovely because it's kind of a dry warmth in the winter. It just is awesome. So, and they do get some rainy season at the beginning. So I don't know how we got to weather. I'm sorry about that.
The Future Minerals Forum, January 10, 11, 2024. Be there.
Leave your winter jacket at home because it's nice.